Are we doing a Rule 63 gender-swapped version of our main trio this week? You bet we're doing a Rule 63 gender-swapped version of our main trio this week. Rule 63. What does it all mean? Back in 2006, there was a popular trope started called Rules of the Internet. You probably have heard of these before. Rules have been added occasionally over the years, and many of them only have context in the communities that made them, like most memes. There are a few notable ones, though. Rule 34, Rule 50, and the one I'm talking about today, Rule 63. Rule 63 states, for every given male character, there is a female version of that character, and vice versa. Additionally, Rule 34 also applies to these characters. Is there any Rule 34 of Tales of Atonement characters? Maybe. One of the most common places where Rule 63 occurs is at comic book conventions, where cosplayers will often defy their own usual gender expression in favor of portraying characters of choice, such as costumes of men dressed as Sailor Moon or women dressed as the Joker. Gender swapping like this isn't just limited to conventions. A lot of series and creators have created gender-swapped characters of their iconic characters, often for a variety of reasons. In Ranma 1/2 by Rumiko Takahashi, the titular Ranma visits the cursed springs of Jusenkyo, a fictional place set in the Bayanhar mountain range in the Qinghai province of China. There are many springs in Jusenkyo, each one dedicated to a creature or person that happened to drown in that spring. There's a panda, a duck, a pig, a cat, but the cursed spring of the drowned girl was the spring that Ranma fell into, resulting in him turning into a red-haired female version of himself. The rest of Ranma's story is about him coping and coming to terms with his new cursed form, and it's seen as probably one of the early definitive transgender stories in anime. Urusei Yatsura is another anime in the same vein, and was also written by Takahashi. Sometimes it's by fan request. Ichiro Oda of One Piece actually drew gender-swapped characters of the entire Straw Hat crew. These are honestly hilarious. With One Piece ending soon, I wonder if Oda will give us an alternate retelling of them all with this style instead. Maybe not the whole thing, just some situational differences. I love Brooke, though. The question makes it obvious. How do you gender-swap a skeleton? Checkmate, TERFs. For that matter, how do you gender-swap someone who's non-binary? Could they be the only type of character immune to Rule 63? Probably. I decided to ask my step-parent about this, and this is what Z had to say. Because gender is about presentation, you'd have to ask yourself about the question, are the characters' genders swapped, or their sex? This got me thinking about how we talk about Rule 63 and brought me to another quandary. Is Rule 63 trans culture? If we take Rule 63 at its original wording, every male character has a female counterpart, and vice versa. That shouldn't have a lot to do with their gender presentation. That means that for Martin to be Rule 63, she'd still have to be reserved, and a stoic woman who's more concerned with things like strength than boys. She probably still has an interest in swords and blacksmithing, and would probably wear pants, at least under her dress. You know, now I'm starting to realize that actually sounds a lot like Blair. Well, I did say they're two sides of the same coin from each other. If we gender swap Blair into a boy, I think he'd be very quintessential of that masculine presence, but probably a lot more rebellious in nature and not willing to be the only one of his 6 brothers who constantly has his little sister bouncing around his feet. You know, Danielle Campbell. Oh, but I guess the names would need to change as well to some extent. A lot of gender-swapped characters just use a more feminine or masculine version of their own given name. Finn to Fiona, Johnny to Jenny, Blossom to Brick, for instance. Okay, the last one's a bit of a misnomer, but in a lot of ways the Rowdy Rough Boys are a gender-swap variant of the Powerpuff Girls. Danielle is an easy swap for Daniel, and Blair is actually a gender-neutral name. But for instance, characters like Madeline and Imel have decidedly feminine names and would probably be changed if the characters were also different genders. The name Madeline means high tower. If we go with using the meaning of names to look for a masculine counterpart, we could go with the Greek name Marlis. Using this sort of convention also for Imel, we'd go with rival and come to the Latin name Emilian. Martin and Shane, though? They have their own original names based on what they would have been called if they were both girls. See, there was originally a plan to have 2 girl siblings for the Riddell family, another set of twins a year younger named Kaelin and Heather. And if you'll remember, Kaelin was based on the old Celtic witch goddess. Now, I can't help but think of how this would drastically change the character dynamics of these 5 people with a gender-swapped variant. Marlis would be extremely handsome, a bit of a pretty boy and very confident. There's a known trope behind guys with that sort of profile. They tend to be playboys of some kind. And in a medieval setting where a lot of society is heavily male-centric, Marlis would be extremely active in his community. While still making friends with the twin Riddle girls, he would have been quick to ask Kaelin to dance, was something she'd probably been extremely confused by, and Heather would still be immediately smitten with him. Also, isn't this interesting? The artists for this week offered a recording of their drawing style. They do this with a lot of their works, and it served our purposes perfectly. How do you like seeing the drawing method? Oh, but back to the topic at hand. Let's dig a bit deeper into this. What is the origin of gender-swapping characters? Well, there are actually several stories in Greek mythology where a person's sex or gender is swapped, most notably around Artemis. In a single passage of only 12 words, we get a very brief story about a Cretan hunter named Cyproietes. The Cretan Cyproietes had also been turned into a woman for having seen Artemis bathing while out hunting. It's also of note that the author of this passage, Antonius Liberalis, was an ancient Greek grammarian who famously wrote a collection of tales called the Metamorphoses. These tales, while not attested to in any other ancient sources, served as new variant myths that mostly involved the Greek gods transforming mortals into various things. A more notable story from the Metamorphoses was the story of Leucippus. Leucippus' parents were Galatea and Lampros. While she was pregnant, Galatea told Lampros she was having a boy. However, Leucippus was born female. Fearing Lampros would reject their child, Galatea concealed this from Lampros well into Leucippus' teenage years. Around puberty, Galatea went to a sanctuary dedicated to the Greek goddess Leto and prayed that her child be changed into a man. Leto heard this plea and decided to help. According to the story, the people of Phaistos, where Leucippus lived, were immediately accepting of his new identity and threw a festival in Leto's honor. Leucippus became the guest of honor, and the festival was named Ecdysia. In Greek, this means to undress, and it was called that because Leucippus was able to remove his peplos after his transformation. And a peplos is that long dress that basically all Grecian women wore back then. Since then, however, the festival has come to symbolize the transformation of boys into men. This sort of tradition involved the boys actually dressing en peploi, so cross-dressing, and then swearing an oath of citizenship before they could reenact Leucippus' transformation. Another tale involved Tiresias. In this one, a clairvoyant oracle named Tiresias is traveling along a path on Mount Selene. He finds a pair of snakes that are, well, copulating and hits them with his walking stick. This apparently greatly angered the goddess Hera, and as punishment, she changed Tiresias into a woman. He remained this way for 7 years, became a priest of Hera, married, and even had children of her own. After 7 years passed, Tiresias found 2 snakes again, but this time she left them alone, and the result was she was released from his punishment. In this way, we can see mostly how, in Grecian lore and subsequently Roman, being changed into a woman was a punishment, but being changed into a man was a prize. There's probably some really ancient misogyny to unpack with that, but this is something that persists even today. Just look at the way society treats what they perceive as tomboys versus femboys. But here on Tales of Atonement, we mess with expectations when it comes to gender all the time. This is neither a punishment nor a reward, it's just a different continuity. Oh god, I actually can't help but think that in that same continuity where Bree and I be boys? I don't want to think about that. Loki, from Norse mythology, would often assume a female persona. Mulan, Joan of Arc, even Stephanie Meyer did an entire reimagined world where Bella and Edward were Beau and Edith? E-D-Y-T-H-E. Yeah, just a really old spelling of Edith with a Y. Well, that's neat. Vampires do be having really old-sounding names sometimes. But not just that. A lot of cartoons have done this too. And I don't mean episodes where a character presents as a different gender or cross-dresses. I mean a full-on Freaky Friday body change or body swap. I guess if I consider it that way, I could also throw Dragon Ball Z onto this list. But I think the one that did this best, in my opinion, has to be Johnny Bravo in an episode titled Witch-A Woman. Similar to Greek stories, Jonathan? Similar to Greek story. Jamathan. Tragedy name. Jonathan and Jamathan. Similar to Grecian stories, Johnny is transformed into a woman by a fortune teller as punishment for his boorishness and misogyny. It isn't until he learns his lesson about the toxic way he treats women that he's changed back into a man. However, he promptly forgets everything he experienced during that day. Here's another prominent example of gender swapping that's been done extremely recently. In Deadpool and Wolverine, which Bree, Andrew, and I just got done watching, we see a multitude of timelines converge, and from those timelines comes the Deadpool Corps. And from the Deadpool Corps comes Wanda Wilson, or Ladypool, of Earth 3010. Ladypool is technically the de facto leader of the Deadpool Corps, as noted by Wade Wilson of Earth 616. Out of need to belong and feel wanted, she joined the side of a group of rebels fighting against loyalists in the United States. Her arch nemesis is that Earth's version of Captain America, called General America. While not a gender-swapped variant of Steve Rogers, this Cap actually fought for a repressive US government against the Deadpool Corps. According to Wanda, the fight started because fascists in the federal government started to impose their will upon the people, causing a schism in Congress. Generals, including Rogers, were taking sides, and the states each declared independence, which eventually led to the United States' current situation in her timeline. Oh gosh, that kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? One notable difference between Wade and Wanda is how Wanda serves as a much more heroic purpose in her world than Wade does in his, even going so far as to sacrifice herself to eventually destroy an evil Deadpool called Dreadpool. Despite this, Ladypool still has the same grating personality that makes her incredibly irritating to be around, often driving other heroes to their wits' end and causing difficulty in her teams. According to Blake Lively, who voiced Ladypool in the movie, she used to watch Gossip Girl with Rob Liefeld and his wife, and the character of Wanda Wilson is partially based on her. The superhero genre is wrought with gender-swapping variants as well, not just Deadpool. Gary Frank reimagined Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Angel, Rogue, and Storm as gender-swap variants in X-Men Millennial Visions, all the way back in the year 2000. In Wonder Woman 777, the titular heroine is transported by Janice to Earth 11, where she meets an entire host of gender-swapped DC heroes and learns that her own gender-swap variant, Dane of Elysium, is an enemy to the Justice League. Oh, quick side note, because you all know mythology is my vibe. Janus is a Roman god and or goddess with two faces. Janus represents beginnings, gates, transitions, time, duality, doorways, passages, frames, and endings. God, Romans would put a lot on their deities. In DC canon, Janus' male half stays in the past, whereas their female half stays in the future. Huh. So who remembers Chrono Trigger, and that Magus' real name is Janus, and it's all about how his future self and his past self, there's probably something to that. I might need to do a Chrono Trigger project. So, it's the extremely prevalent and popular style of storytelling. But why? Well, on one hand, it's possible that gender-swapping characters is about having a social commentary on the aspects of our culture. Like with Johnny, we can use gender-swapping to reimagine character dynamics and look at how they reflect the world around them. Misogyny is about perspective. The way women are treated by men or by other women in a male-centric society is harmful and degrading. Women are put down as being subservient to men, and society reflects that. A few privileged women are given status and safety over the rest of us, and it becomes a cycle of abuse. That abuse is perpetrated for centuries, where women weren't even allowed to play female roles in plays. Women weren't allowed to hold jobs or own any land. We've talked about this type of primogeniture before. Going back to ancient times, especially Western monarchies were decided by male primogeniture, the firstborn son. It wasn't until the 1980s where the first lineal primogeniture monarchy was implemented in Sweden. This was done to displace Carl Gustaf XVI's infant son Philip for his older daughter, Victoria. As a note, this is the same family line as Gustav Adolf II. Go watch our video on Final Fantasy IV. After that, several other monarchies followed suit, and it was also adopted by the Mayflower monarchy long before I was born. Another reason for gender-swapping characters might be about representation. It's important for people to see characters they can relate with in media. I think about how many of the worst kind of dudes feel represented by characters like Rick Sanchez, Tyler Durden, or Walter White. These aren't role models, people! They're meant to be read as the worst kind of person. Anti-heroes, villains, a lot of them, that just happen to be the main characters of their stories. But I digress. Look at Fiona and Cake. Through them, we can see a different perspective on all of the characters, even going so far as to show us gender-bent versions of Lemongrab, Ice King, and Marceline. Peltobor did this because of one of his colleagues, Natasha Allegri, who also famously created Bee and Puppycat, which, if you haven't seen, but you're into the sort of surrealism fantasy that Adventure Time offers, it's worth a watch. Ward saw Allegri's designs for Fiona and Cake and really liked them, so he made those episodes, and they were some of the best Adventure Time had to offer, so much they made an entire spin-off series. Having that sort of representation makes the series more accessible to more and more fans. It doesn't mean shows have to gender-bend characters, it still has a similar benefit of perspective. But then another reason could be to explore themes of biological sex from a transgender or queer perspective. I say it like that because, obviously gay guys and lesbians like girl characters too. Shake any magical girl fandom and a few rainbow-colored fruits will fall out. Sailor Moon had a ton of gender swapping going on. Whether you want to figure it was because of the localization problems at the time, such as Zoisite being changed into a woman for Western releases of the 90s anime, due to being in a gay relationship with Kunzite. Fisheye of the Dead Moon Circus is portrayed either as a gay man, a femboy, or in some interpretations, as a trans woman because, despite having he-him pronouns in his villain attire, she often dresses effeminately and presents as a woman in civilian segments, especially toward Mamoru. Haruka, or Sailor Uranus, identifies as a lesbian. However, certain sources will state that they use masculine or feminine pronouns interchangeably. Haruka has been read as a trans man, a butch lesbian, non-binary, and many other variations. And that's to say nothing of the Sailor Starlights. The concept around the Sailor Starlight gender has long been debated even among the most diehard Sailor Moon fans, and was so controversial it didn't even air in the United States because of the Starlight's genders. Seiya, Taiki, and Yaten, or Sailor Star Fighter, Sailor Star Maker, and Sailor Star Healer, respectively, are three characters in the later part of the Sailor Moon anime. They come to Earth posing as an all-male group of singers, but official sources state that they are women disguised as men. That didn't stop some translations, most notably German, from making them men who transformed into women because they didn't want to show Usagi or Sailor Moon in a romantic relationship with Seiya due to them both being girls. Which, I don't know, why didn't they just make them cousins, I guess? Everyone bought that travesty. Another magical girl show that I'll mention with that regard is not actually Japanese, but is actually an Australian-made show by Obi Scott Wade called Shizao. I'm just gonna say, this show is not that great. It follows the story of a boy named Guy, that's clever, who finds his aunt's magic superhero ring. When Guy puts it on, he's transformed into the femme fatale superhero known as Shizao. Part of the problem with Shizao is that it doesn't do a lot for commentary. Transforming into a femme superhero is played up as a joke, and her weapons are things like a butility belt that has laser lipstick, ballistic fishnets, mascara whips, and a compact that acts as a communication device. It's a pile of tropes and pink spandex that, honestly speaking, Totally Spies did way better. The show ran for one season, and you can watch the entirety of it for free online. Just don't expect anything remarkable. Watch Totally Spies instead. In fact, Totally Spies did do a gender-swapped episode in the 19th episode of Season 2 called Totally Switched. In the episode, well-known people in England have been making headlines after completely changing their personalities and interests. The girls investigate, but Samantha and Alexandria mysteriously vanish. Clover calls Jerry for help, and the two figure out that each pair of people affected have had their personalities exchanged. This ends up affecting Clover and Jerry, who effectively become the gender swap for this episode, in which Jerry, as Clover, goes on to appear as a guest star on a popular show hosted by a in-character version of Aaron Carter, and Jerry goes on to be knighted. However, this is eventually ruined by Clover being in Jerry's body. But whether it's through switching bodies with someone of the opposite sex, being transformed by magic, or simply meeting another world variant of oneself that happens to be born differently, these perspectives can give us not only a much-needed look at the world through the eyes of a person we wouldn't otherwise know, it can also help normalize gender nonconformity. The more of these types of characters, ideas, tropes are used to break down stereotypical ideas around gender roles and conventional gender norms. Perspective creates tolerance and acceptance. And that's why I think that gender bending, Rule 63, sex swapping, whatever term you want to call it, is necessarily queer or trans culture. Seeing gender swap versions of different characters, especially in a canonical setting, can make those groups feel represented. They can find a way to explain their stories in a way that other people, cisgender people, might not be able to understand. Through seeing Jenny Bravo with the same confidence and style as Johnny Bravo, or with Sailor Moon and the Starlights, Fiona and Cake, Rana One Half, and especially Tales of Atonement. Our stories are about our experiences. The people we know to the people we don't. We share this information with you in order to form a connection, to establish our way of looking at the world so you know what to expect from our characters. Pat Smith is explicitly a trans man, and should be read as such. Madeline is more dominant than Martin, while Shane is very typically masculine and tries to actually adhere to his gender roles pretty hard. Sometimes these things come into conflict with them. Like how Pat loves Blair, but if they were born a boy, that relationship wouldn't be seen as a problem and might even be celebrated. The fear of that societal rejection can be isolating and can cause people to make extremely rash judgments. Knowing there's people out there who accept you for who you are regardless of the circumstances is how you raise healthier, stronger societies. Expecting people to always fit into one of two boxes doesn't work. Humanity is way more complex than that. And that's what we see when we think about how gender affects these characters. A simple change like that could mean an entire dynamic shift, like Marlis being more confident and forward than Madeline, or Heather being very strictly feminine where Shane is not. But how would changing gender affect Martin? It doesn't really seem to. At least, I don't think it would. Not that I would know or anything. If anything, it would change how people perceive the actions Kaylin would take. Being a blacksmith while not caring about boys would be seen as odd. Her stoic attitude might come across as being a bit more sarcastic. This one I know personally. Even in real life, I tend to be a very stoic person, but when guys talk to me, they think I'm being intentionally sarcastic instead of just genuinely indifferent. Plus, I can't help but smile when I get nervous, and that tends to send some mixed signals. Do any guys have trouble with that? What sort of things have you done that might have sent some mixed signals about intent with people who are flirting with you? Well, now that I'm all done with this, I want to try something new. Bree hasn't seen this picture yet, and I wanted to record her reaction. So let's go to that.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah?
Is that
Yeah, that's the three of them.
wow, you've got to show that. You have to show that to people. Oh, it's so cute.
They're all so pretty.
They have the cutest little noses. They remind me of Who's.
Who's?
Like the Whoville
Like soy
Who's.
Who's?
Oh my gosh, they're adorable. I like them.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Bree.
I especially like the red one that's supposed to be
Kaylin.
okay.
Kaylin is Martin. Marlis is Madeline. And Heather is Shane.
God, he's still so girly looking. Of course Shane's girly looking. He's a girl. I mean Marlis, I guess.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, Madeline's so pretty. So
I know, she's so pretty. You can't not make her pretty no matter what she looks like. I love Kaylin. I love Kaylin's hair. Oh my gosh, that's so. They both have like. Both of the girls have really, really pretty hair, and you can really see all the lights catching off of them.
Right.
But I really like the complexity of Kaylin's hair because her hair is curlier.
Yeah, I think they would have the same exact hairstyle, same hair grade. It's just Heather puts more effort into it.
Yeah. Well, even so, Shane's hair, even though they have the same hairstyle, hair quality, I think Shane's hair looks a little straighter. Or maybe it's just because of the way he wears his bangs so short.
Probably. Art for this week goes by Illust on Fiverr. They're a cartoonist and illustrator, and while they might be new to doing commissions, the quality of this work was well worth the time spent. I love the attention to details, not to mention the highly detailed artwork. Plus, seeing their drawing method was a wonderfully nice touch. Click the commission link down in the description if you'd like to support this artist personally.
Plan on getting their work again!
Art for this channel wouldn't even be possible, however, without the help of our patrons. Monetization on YouTube is not enough to keep us going, so please follow the Patreon link down in the description to help Tales of Atonement keep going long term. We have a lot left to do and a big story to tell, and we simply can't do it without your help. Besides, there's a ton of extras only available on Patreon that won't be available for months on YouTube, if ever. Some of our great patrons include Pammy Poo, Shadow Fox, Arya Gamari, Charles Tam, Jace Moreland, and Lunder Lumen. Thank you all for watching and supporting our story.